So I played the Order 1886, and to no one's surprise, I was heavily underwhelmed. Is that even a word? This was my third time giving it a shot, and this time I really just forced myself through the slog that is the gameplay, pacing, story, and visuals. And for a player like me that will quite possibly play anything that comes my way, and will try to find redeeming qualities of any game, boy was it hard to find anything worthwhile here. So why are we talking about it today? What is there to add to the conversation when talking about the Order 1886? I mean, hell, we could try to pitch a reboot where we change up the formula and fix all the stuff the game had faltered on. Yes, this is Player's Pitch, and today I want to visualize an imaginary world where Sony somehow greenlit a reboot for the Order 1886, and we got some type of mission-based campaign with optional missions that can be played in solo or co-op in very open areas and multiple objectives with a bigger selection of weapons and abilities. I'll be going over what changes I'd like to see in terms of its story, structure, and gameplay, and really visualize what a reboot of this game would look like, because the potential for a good or even a great game was there for the 1886, but it just misses the mark just a bit, and hopefully today we can hit that.
You should learn it is best not to cross him when his mind is set on something.
One of the many weak links of the Order 1886 was its story. It was boring, but did have potential and was going for that mature PlayStation exclusive narrative focused single player experience. This is why instead of a sequel, we're pitching a reboot. Spoilers for the Order 1886, if you care, I guess. One of the main plot points of the Order was how the Order itself was corrupt and lied about a bunch of the morals and rules they had about half-breeds. Throw that out the window. Cool idea, but poor execution, honestly one that I barely remember. Matter of fact, throw all these characters out of here too. The cast and the main crew you fight alongside with never get too interesting or memorable either. So with that being said, clean slate. Give us a new 3-person squad of characters with much more dynamic personalities that just bounce off of each other and are not just the French guy that wants to bang every girl he looks at, or the sassy woman that keeps calling the old protagonist old. Give us a new crew with fresher personalities and with actual histories with each other, since the Order is supposed to feel like some sort of brotherhood, and have moments that build up those relationships and focus more on that. Give more time to build those relationships, and that way the player becomes much more attached to these characters when something happens, unlike in the Order 1886. And from here on out, I'm just going to be mentioning it as the Order, because saying 1886 a lot is very annoying. Thank you very much. In terms of an antagonistic force, hear me out, have the Order fight a different secret organization, one that is even more familiar with the supernatural and that use that to their advantage to create weapons and produce experiments on half-breeds and other creatures. So while the Order uses science and engineering to create their weapons and have more of a tactical approach to their missions, this Syndicate, we'll call it, uses magic and the supernatural to work in the shadows and ambush their targets. I mentioned earlier some of the aspects of the supernatural that the Order touches on with the half-breeds, but that's it, and that's something I wish we had more of in the Order, and have them commit harder with the supernatural threats that you encounter. Give us more werewolves, vampires, and strange Lovecraftian creatures you have to fight as the Order, and that are being used by the Syndicate to create strange weapons, and obviously still have some more of those great enemies like the gangs around London. So to recap, we got the Order versus the Syndicate with a whole new crew and even more monsters and gangs to fight. But what's the story? For a brief outline, the Order goes about their business hunting supernatural creatures when they discover the Syndicates and their experiments, where they're trying to develop some type of drug that would create controlled half-breeds and would lead an army that would take over London. It's a basic good guy that needs to save the city from the bad guys, but what I want more than anything is to really focus on the relationships of not just the team themselves, but the Order as a whole. Have those characters connect more and have them grow closer throughout the story, similar to a Mass Effect. Develop trusts and bonds, and sometimes even enemies in your own team that will either prioritize in assisting you in combat or neglecting you altogether.
Isabeau, you and Lafayette take the high street from the south end. Galahad and I will move in from the north.
Why not give the Frenchman to Galahad?
The Order 1886 is your standard chapter-to-chapter story that was heavily inconsistent. Some chapters would be a full hour of gameplay, others would just be a couple of cutscenes that would last a few minutes with no gameplay at all. For this reboot, I want a more open mission-based structure, similar to Metal Gear Solid 5. You start off in your base with the Order and talk to NPCs to grow those previously mentioned relationships and friendships, take on side missions, and upgrade or unlock more weapons or tools that you get to take on to missions. Prior to each mission, you select your loadout and tools. not in a games as a service type of way with tiered loot and stuff, but more like a Back 4 Blood where you unlock weapons and perks and tools that you get to use throughout your journey. Missions are split up into main mission stories to obviously progress the story and have more of these cinematic cutscenes and set pieces, and there are also side missions that are more focused on growing those relationships with your team, not just characters you do missions with, but the people you have back in your base, like in Hades. Side missions will also help you explore more of the world, unlocking more stuff for your character, and stuff like that with much more simpler objectives. There will also be co-op missions that work similarly to the main story missions in size and add much more to a separate storyline that could also still be played solo if you like and experience that story. But the focus is kind of in co-op, but you can still play them in solo. Missions are very open and would have you pick from a number of different districts. You pick a distinct one and would have an objective to do in there. It would be very open-ended in its design and would provide the player with a lot more options depending on what type of equipment you bring. You can explore these levels to uncover more lore about the game or find weapons and tool modifications for future missions. In terms of gameplay, the Order did feel good to play. The shooting was good and the traversal wasn't too slow. It was great for the most part, which is why there's not much I would change here in terms of its core gameplay. Keep the cover system, keep the traversal, and just add a little bit more to it. For the combat, it would be best to have 2 primary weapons and a sidearm as opposed to a 2-weapon limit, and use the D-pad to select your weapons from there. Use the left to right options to be your primaries and the bottom to be your sidearm. But what would the top be? Well, I would want to expand a little bit more on the melee combat. Have that be more of a viable option when fighting enemies and be able to swap melee weapons and use different kinds. So instead of having this punch out minigame, I would want it to work almost like The Last of Us Part 2 and how that melee works with the dodging mechanic. Not a huge change, but just a tiny bit more depth to keep the combat fresh and provide the player with more options. As I previously stated, prior to each mission you select your loadout. 2 primaries, a sidearm, a melee weapon, a throwable, and now 2 pieces of equipment and 3 perks. In terms of equipment, these are mainly forms to assist the player to traverse each level or in combat, such as a grappling hook to help you scale buildings, that weird electrical tool in the main game to access different areas or to control different things in the environment, or even a simple radio to call in for support in certain areas with snipers or just basic grunts. Each piece of equipment provides the player with multiple options for each mission, and in co-op missions, having a combination of certain equipment types really allows for some really cool synergy, like having some type of breaching tool alongside a surveillance scan, or a grappling hook used to cover your enemies from above as they approach a group of enemies from below. As far as perks go, they would function a lot more like traits. Rather than improve your shooting or basic gameplay mechanics, they serve in a way to add additional unique skills to your character that open up even more options. For example, some type of locksmith or bribery perk to gain access to more areas, a gunsmith perk that allows you to use more attachments on your weapons or equipment, a Deadeye perk that allows you to do that slow motion Deadeye shooting move from the main game. Small changes like that make your character unique enough and don't just add unnecessary buffs or tweaks like in more loot focused games. I want it to be a bigger focus on making your character unique in terms of your approach to each of these missions. Now here's a quick fire round of changes I thought were pretty self-explanatory. 1. Remove these stupid black bars, for Christ's sake. 2. Give us the ability to create a character similar to Mass Effect or Cyberpunk. Have the template that's supposed to be the main character and that's the face of the box, but still allow the player to make their own character. 3. Provide different outfits or armor that don't affect stats, but they're purely cosmetic, just to make that character a lot more unique that way. 4. Have each district be visually unique and missions during different conditions like in rain or snow. 5. Each district should also be open but dense, with a good amount of interiors to explore and to utilize to complete objectives. And lastly, have a good balance between combat with humans and monsters. Let me fight and hunt more monsters and not just have humans be the main conflict 80% of the time. The Order 1886 has some great potential that I really hope they get to explore one day, because if they made something like this that gave the player a lot more agency and not be an almost claustrophobic linear cinematic shooter, it would have been something great, or at the very least a whole lot better than Ready at Dawn's debut new IP at the time. Now they're much more focused on VR titles, which is great for them, but I really wish for them, or possibly some other studio, to explore the interesting world that the Order had to offer just a bit more. Ultimately, I think it would be an interesting direction to take this IP, and with a more open-ended, mission-based shooter with a higher emphasis on squad relationships and player choice. It's not perfect, but hell, That's why it's just a pitch. Let me know what you liked about it, what you would have done, or suggested differently, or give me your own original pitch about where you would want the order to go to. I definitely want to do more of these after doing The Last of Us 1 a while back, but hell, I'm not a game designer, but I do like giving ideas to make games more fun or interesting, so let me know what you think. With that being said, thank you for watching, I hope you have a great day, and remember to love each other.